Welcome to a media podcast called Life Mastery. Now, I started this podcast for a couple of reasons. Number one is a little bit selfish because I love listening to and spending time with interesting people. Number two is I want this to be a bit of a toolkit for people, young and old, to learn from people with diverse experiences. You'll hear conversations with entrepreneurs, Olympic athletes, top corporate leaders and more, and they all have something valuable to share about what really matters in life. Along the way, I'll share some of my own experiences, the wins, the losses, the risks I've taken, and the moments of joy and tragedy. So listen with an open mind, and hopefully you'll take away something useful. Thank you and enjoy. If you want to learn more about an elite athlete's mindset, both on and off the field, this podcast is for you. Tess Howard is a current GB and England hockey player with over 75 caps and 30 goals with a Commonwealth gold medal from 2022. She's also a Durham University former student who made waves with a 2023 study on how gender-specific sport uniforms lead to a higher dropout rates among girls in school sports. The research gained widespread attention and prompted Tess to push for changes in international hockey uniform rules, allowing women the choice between skorts and shorts within the same team. Last year, she showcased these changes at the Euros, where the team sported both shorts and skorts, and her efforts earned her the Sunday Times Sportswoman of the Year Changemaker Award. Tess continues to make a difference with her non-for-profit inclusive sportswear dedicated to promoting inclusivity in sports attire. We recorded this podcast before the Paris Olympics and spoke a lot about her journey in becoming an Olympic athlete, including some of the highs and lows, including a serious knee injury, as well as a campaign for change in women's sportswear. I hope you enjoy it. God bless. Now, thanks so much for joining me on Life Mastery. I want to go back to where it all started for you because you're somebody who is an elite level athlete and it must have started somewhere. So I wanted to understand where your passion for sport and your journey in sport and where it all came from.
My passion in sport was born on the rugby pitch, following my older brother and my dad to rugby training on a Sunday morning. And I think something about the ritual of packing your bag, going to training, being with the boys, and just getting stuck in, whether it's, in the pouring rain, in the mud. I just loved it. And it was tag rugby when I was 5. So it was running around, how many tags can get? And yeah, I was probably one of the best taggers, as my dad still attests. And actually one of the current England boys breaking into the England squad in rugby is somebody that I played with at 5 years old. So the two of us have sort of gone different paths, but stayed in the same team, or elite team, I guess. So that's kind of where the passion started. And then when girls couldn't play rugby anymore, when I turned 11, to the horror of my teammates, I had to stop, and my mum took me to Sunday morning training for hockey at Cambridge City Hockey Club, and so that's where I started, picked up a stick. And I think the difference for me between rugby and hockey was I only had 1 year of contact, so I was a keen tackler, but in hockey there was a lot more dexterity to the game and a lot more individual skill that you could develop. And I think that sort of element of both tactical, team, technical stuff that you could hone like mastery on your own, but you could also, the team is what wins the game. So that combination really made me fall in love with sport.
There's a big difference though between being passionate about a sport, really enjoying it, playing it at a junior level, and then becoming an elite athlete. So what were some of the defining moments in your career and in your journey to get you to where you are now? Have you got anything in mind that you might want to discuss, any stories?
Definitely. Absolutely. Loads of stories. I think there are a few key turning points in my junior journey. The first one is knowing at a young age that I can't win the game on my own. And, sometimes that, 12-year-old characteristic sometimes does come out, that ultra competitiveness. But I think when I was 12, it was very easy for me to sort of win the game for the team, like run around, like it, as hockey is, when it's 7-a-side on a small pitch, you have one player that can dribble around everyone and score. That's, you win the game basically. But as I got older, sort of 13, 14, 15, and I saw on other teams the players who were doing that and just getting tackled or, not passing. And I think something that I learnt quite early on, once I got into a team, that there were other people on the team that understood how to play hockey. I think it was that the power of the team, or the ultimate skill, is a pass. And that's something that I still believe in now, that you can have all the technical skills and eliminate, but ultimately making that pass for a teammate to score is way more rewarding than scoring yourself. And I still feel that today. I mean, I love scoring, of course. It's sort of my job, if you like, but creating the goal is more important than who actually puts it in the goal. Something that I learned early on. The second thing is what a hockey player is. And this was taught to me when I was 17 and I joined the under 18 England side. And I had my first female head coach called Sarah Kelleher. And she's a fantastic Irish woman, played internationally. And she built values of our team. It was the first time this sort of idea of values and philosophy was brought into hockey for me. And I'm a very passionate person. And she saw that passion as a skill. And she saw bravery as a skill. She saw grit and determination and competitiveness as aspects of the game. And previously, I just was sort of mastering my, backhand hitting, my forehand hitting, my skills. And the things that I think I learned when I was on the rugby pitch at age 6 were coming out as sort of my key core characteristics. And we built this sort of pyramid of values. And I remember there was one day which was called Being a Champion Day. And we would have these days, camps, and we would learn a specific value of what it meant to be a hockey player. You got 17, 18-year-old girls, and some people are buying into it, some people aren't. But I was really buying into all of these characteristics. And the Champion Day, at the end of the day of each of these, somebody would win the prize for being the most something, the most gritty, the most creative, the most champion-like. And the team would vote. And on Champion Day, I got voted the most champion-like. And I was really confused because I had never won anything at junior level. Like the closest I'd got to was, my school team, which was, a little bit ropey. We managed to somehow find our way to an indoor national final. But, I'd never won anything, even at club level. And so I was confused about why my teammates had voted me the most champion-like. And so I asked Sarah afterwards, I was like, why? And she said it was the way that I carried myself in every match. Even though I wasn't necessarily winning every single thing, I was the most champion-like because of the way I carried myself. And that was kind of a big moment because it took a good 5 years, I think that's accurate, 5 years from that point for me to win the first thing that I ever won, which was the Commonwealth Games. And to think that that's my first gold medal of anything is quite remarkable. And I'm not counting getting promoted into National League with Cambridge City women's ones when I was 17. I'm not counting that as a victory, but in terms of getting my hands on an actual gold medal. And so that's a really interesting part. And then I think my final major learning was when I had another coach called Paul Revington, who's now the head coach of the men's GB team. And this is a great story because it's similar to the character. He's South African, as is my family, so we took to each other. And I remember this team meeting, and there's a clip of me not sort of pressing this player, not being aggressive in my movements, being a little bit slow, and not being decisive. And he's in front of the whole crowd, and it was the day that we had a lot of coaches in to watch him, like how he operates. And he says, "Right, Tess, what are you in?" and pointing at the screen. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, Revs, I'm in space. And he's like, no, think about it. What are you in? Everyone's just like so confused. What is Revs on about? And he's like, you're in a cage. You are an animal and you need to be released from your cage and go and press this girl. You're all in cages. And that was a massive moment. And I'm allowed to do the South African accent because it's my family's heritage. But a massive moment for me because he nicknamed me the animal, and in an endearing way. And my teammates started calling me the animal, and that was sort of a character that I probably still exhibit today. That sort of hungry, relentless, give it all for your team. And the idea of getting released from your cage was huge because it was 6 months from that meeting that I was having my debut for the GB team at age 19. And I think going the 3 years of those three things that I learned meant that my rise from my first junior cap at age 16 to my senior cap at age 19 was 3 years. So, I mean, it's quite remarkable, but I would really give those three things the weighting they deserve, and the coaches and the mentors that I had.
When you mentioned about getting the award for the way that you carry yourself, what are some of the specific characteristics that you think people picked up on? Because carrying yourself in a certain way can mean so many different things.
I think at the time it was that I would always try things, and I never had a barrier placed in me mentally. So I would always think there's a way to win. I would always think there's a way to find a pass that would lead to a win. And I would have a do or die attitude when it comes to defending. And then after the game, though, during this day, Sarah is talking to us about what a champion is, and on and off the pitch, you are a champion, and that winning is not necessarily part of being a champion. Sure, there's a championship. You might win the trophy, but are you truly a champion? And I think the most important part of my journey was my ACL rehab, and I was certainly not a champion. I did not win the bronze medal at the Olympics that my teammates did because I was rehabbing. But in that period, I ebbed and flowed through who I was. And at the end of it, it was the biggest gold medal I could have ever won. Sure, I did win the Commonwealth gold medal after my rehab, 16 months after my rehab. But for me, an internal winning of internal champion, conquering rehab was probably the biggest thing that I've ever achieved and still do today.
I want to move on to your ACL injury in a minute, but I want to understand like your mindset. For example, you talked about finding that key pass, that making that key move happen in a game or even in training. How did you deal with things like, for example, when that key pass doesn't come off, it gets intercepted or someone tackles you, and not just how you dealt with it, but how did the team around you deal with it?
Well, I mean, setback is always a part of sport, and I think I've always had a very playful attitude to competition because I have a lot of perspective as well. Being a geographer, being lucky enough to travel the world when I was younger and see really what is important. So whether or not a pass comes off or a goal goes in, I have quite a quick turnaround in how I view it. I also just think there's a lot of fun to be had when you're playing sport. I mean, people pay me to play hockey. I mean, that is a joke, really, in the grand scheme of things. So, if I'm training and, there's an element of fun to taking it seriously. And I do take it extremely seriously. But I'm not going to say that it's a train smash if it doesn't come off. However, to be able to get to the elite level and to be able to really win medals and win games, you have to have a shift in mindset to when you step on the pitch, everything matters. And I think that's kind of what I've learned, because whilst doing all of my work outside of hockey and my studies, and I can sometimes get, lost in the perspective because I'm like, well, it doesn't really matter because it's just putting a ball in the goal. But to be able to still be an elite athlete, you have to treat that ball going in the goal as if it's something that really, really matters. And ultimately what I think I've tried to, now striking the balance. When I was at the Olympic qualifiers, putting the ball in the goal meant going to the Olympics, and going to the Olympics meant going to the Olympics wearing shorts. And what else does that mean? And so you break it down from the biggest thing that you want all the way down to, this is actually about putting the ball in the goal now. So, I mean, you asked me like how I deal with it not happening. Kind of depends on what the stakes are. But I am extremely hard on myself when it comes to these things, because I know, success on the pitch has a massive impact off it. And throughout the whole last 2 years of what I've done, being able to stay on the team and be an impact on the team and be a name on the team has carried the movement as well. And so I am acutely aware of it. So at training, I'm a bit like, I do take it extremely seriously. But then off it, I'll say, it doesn't really matter.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is like your propensity to risk at different points. So, for example, your propensity to risk in training will be completely different to, say, maybe playing a National League game versus playing a GB friendly versus playing an Olympic qualifier versus playing in the Olympics, and how you kind of manage that. Because having that, I guess having the guts to be able to take that risk as well could actually win you a game in the Olympics as well. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. So I'll give you an example. At the Olympic qualifiers in the first game against Canada, we won a stroke, and I take the strokes for the team at the moment. And it's something that's mentally, the risk reward of putting yourself out there to take the strokes is so high. You don't do it, you potentially, you might not go to the Olympics, but you do it and you go to them. Like, it's just the risk reward is so high. But why I take those moments is because I love the pressure, because I want to see if I can do it. And I know I have the skill to do it. So it's whether or not I have the nerve. And that was I kind of knew in that first game there was going to be a stroke. And so I had mentally prepared. But I mean, in all the risks that I take in the games, like, I try to play matches how I train, and my risk reward, especially because I'm a forward and I can afford to make mistakes, because it's the risk reward is a lot higher. I am that player. I will take shots. I will throw myself around. I will, because again in the semi-final against Belgium, there was a ball loose in the D, and I'll throw myself to it, full dive to try and score. And fortunately, that one did go in. But I don't think there are a lot of players that would see an opportunity. And when we say risk, I mean, yeah, sure, I could have, I don't know, at that point, I just don't see what the downfall is. And that's why I always love to, like, rather than go for corners, I like to go for the goal, because the reward is so much higher. But I think in training, like, I used to get worried about making mistakes, and I just don't really care anymore, because it's the only way you learn. And whilst I have extremely high, like, standards of my basics, there are things that I let myself experiment with. And so if you like, I have sort of like an 80-20 rule where, that 80% of the session, every single basic has got to be there, because that matters to me. And there's also a lot of mastery in that. Like, I really enjoy trapping the ball really well and playing it. But then there's a 20%, which is like sort of my, let's just see what happens. Let's throw an aerial cross pitch. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you've also, I guess, got to have the support of the teammates around you, because your team, your coaches have got to understand that, yeah, you are going to take a risk, and yet that may not come off. But the more times you're able to practice taking those risks, the more times it will end up coming off in that crucial moment as well.
Yeah, and that's why we sort of split it into, it's especially like as you're closer to the D, you can take more risks. But the detail that needs to happen in your pressing and in your deep defense, like, that is where you have to switch on your logical brain. And then when you get closer to the attacking goal, you can sort of have a bit more bit more fun with it, which is why I'm a forward. I would be bored if I was a defender.
Tell me about your ACL injury then, and how it came about, and the moment that it happened, or that you realised that it was quite a serious injury, how you kind of dealt with that and processed that.
I just went into complete shock and denial, really. It happened 100 days before the Tokyo Olympics, which was 2021 because of it being postponed. So I was just, normal day. It was a bit frosty, 13th of April. Why it had to be that, I don't know. Just normal. We delayed training a bit because it was a bit icy. So I don't know if that has any impact. But just playing a 5v5 game and went right to left, and my right knee just buckled and I fell to the ground screaming, and all my teammates hands went to their mouths, like everybody was dead silent, the whole pitch stopped, and the physio ran over. I was like, extremely in a lot of pain, and then I realized that everybody had stopped. I was like, no, I'm fine. Got up and I was like, oh, that was a nasty fall, and then walked over to the sideline. And I could walk, I could even jog in a straight line, because ACLs don't do anything for change unless you're changing direction. So then I went into the doctor's room. They did the ACL test and they told me it was fine, because I don't know if they thought it was fine, or because they wanted to send me in for a scan. I don't know if they didn't want to break the news to me then, unless they were 100% sure. So I saw, now looking back, I can picture them sort of looking at each other kind of worried, saying, let's take you for a scan right now. I remember lying in the MRI thinking, I need a plan B if this doesn't go well. But I had thought it could be a couple of months and Olympics would be touch and go. I did not expect it to be an ACL. So I got the call that night at 9 p.m. from the doctor. And she was like, I have to just tell you right straight away, ruptured your ACL. And I just collapsed on the kitchen floor. And I've never had that level of internal pain, crying. I just didn't understand how, because I didn't think it was that bad. And then you just, and then I was just like, so I'm just confirming this means I'm not going to the Olympics. And they were like, no, it's 12 months. You're not going to make it for 3 months. So yeah, I think weirdly, I wrote an Instagram post 2 days after the day after it happened. And I look back at that, and that is a heavy message that I wrote. I think that the opening lines are with a heavy heart, I write this 100 days before Tokyo. And, it was very hard. Floods of messages coming in, and I just couldn't quite believe it. I think what I knew it was going to come back. I just knew it was going to be a bloody hard trip to get back.
I'll just move on to the next question. So you said that there was that internal pain that you'd never felt before. Do you think it was the realization that you weren't going to the Olympics because you'd worked so hard to get there, not just in the previous cycle, but your whole life? Or do you think there was a bit of a fear that maybe I'll never be able to return to hockey and play at the level I've played at in the last few months? I mean, what was it that was really kind of giving you that internal pain that you felt?
Great question. I haven't dived into this for a while. I feel like it was because I couldn't play hockey for 12 months. And that brings me so much joy. I think it was mixed with the Olympics, mixed with the fact that it was postponed the year prior and I was very ready to go, mixed with the fact that our head coach had just told me, just, get ready for the Olympics. Don't worry about selection, just keep going the way, think about performance rather than selection. And I think in some point I was like, will I have another chance? But, you know, I didn't dream of going to the Olympics. That was not my thing when I was growing up. I to be quite honest, I dreamed about saving elephants and conservation, which is what my mum does. And I dreamed about the mark I would leave on the world, I guess, you know, in a very sort of 14-year-old sort of I will save the world sort of view. But I think when you get so close to something that is the pinnacle of your profession, then having that taken away, and that's kind of how it felt like it was taken away unjustly. And I also thought, you know, I'll be very candid here, I felt like I didn't deserve that could happen to me. So in a very weird way, I just thought it was unjust, and fairness is a huge part of what I believe in. And so I was like, why, universe, why? And then through the process of grieving, I definitely hit multiple stages, the anger, the depression, definitely had a lot of that depression. But actually it was what got me out of it was New Year's Day, or New Year's Eve, actually. I watched Don't Look Up. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's essentially a huge metaphor for climate change, and no spoilers, but, you know, at the end of the film, the screen just goes black and that's it. And I was watching this and, you know, feeling very sorry for myself with my like knee. And I was like, oh gosh, like my life's not over. Like, come on. And I had to sort of looked in the mirror and I was like, I've got 6 months until the Commonwealth Games. Like, am I going to make it? That I can make it. I know I can make it. Am I going to do it is the massive question. And that's kind of where I say, like, I like pressure because I want to see if I can. And then, you know, as soon as I woke up on that New Year's Day, I was like, right, here we go. Completely changed my routine. Woke up at 6 a.m. for about 3 months and did 2 hours of work. So I was still studying, finishing off my degree. Did 2 hours of work in the morning, had my coffee and my turmeric shot. Then went and had breakfast, had my physio and my rehab, then, you know, did the team stuff, and then came home and was ready to do it all over again the next day. And I'm a very disciplined person when I want to be. And sort of all of the, I think when I was at school, having to be so disciplined with what I did school-wise so that I kept my academics up whilst doing all the hockey and other extracurricular stuff. I think it all came at the right time, all these skills. And I was just like, right, we are doing this. And that's kind of my attitude to a lot of things, is like, it's an ultimate organization. It really got me out of my ACL depression.
And there must have been moments, even though, you know, you can be super disciplined, you can be super positive, but when you're going through any sort of injury rehab, there are those moments where things don't all follow the straight upward graph that you'd like them to follow. And there's going to be times where you're going to have a couple of setbacks. So how did you deal with those, like, days where you came back and you're thinking, oh man, like, it's not going where I want it to go? Am I going to be able to make the Commonwealth Games?
I think I always had hope in the back of my mind, but, you know, I brushed over that. I said briefly, I was in the depression. Like, I really, really struggled months 4 to 6, and it was over Christmas period. My teammates weren't around because there was a program break, so I was by myself with my, you know, S&C coach every day, and I was living alone because nobody was around, and it was very, very hard. And to be honest, you asked me, like, how did I manage? If I wasn't feeling great, I would probably just go eat a tub of ice cream. Like, that was really where I was at. I was an elite athlete doing my ACL rehab, and I was just like, yes, I think an entire tub of Nutella chocolate would be good right now. Which wasn't unhelpful because it really put me in a bad place. But then, you know, that kind of was a double setback, and it was a bit strange. I was kind of like on a bit of a high for the first 3 months because I was like, you know, I was learning to walk again, so that was quite fun. But as soon as it got into sort of the real grind, you're building back your ACL, and that the only way you can build back hamstring muscle and quad muscle is to just do it every day.
Exactly.
And there's no shortcuts. You can't like pretend to do a hamstring bridge. If you want your hamstring to be strong again so you can sprint, you have to freaking go to your max. So I think pushing myself to the max every day was draining, and that's what happened. But the other thing, was my studies. So as I said, like I did 2 hours of work in the morning. That was my time. And what I realized is like during my depression period, I didn't do any studying because I didn't have any energy to do it. And I was just so sad. But then as soon as I got into a routine, I really started to enjoy it again. And I love studying. I love learning. And to bring that back into my life and give myself something that was completely irrelevant to hockey kind of reinvigorated it. And then I started thinking about, do I want to publish my research that I had done really well in the year before? And so I had like a few things which starting to spark, and it's why I continue to do everything I do outside of hockey, because I could never put all my eggs in one basket, and it was sort of like sparking each other. So, how I got out of the depression was really actually by massively boosting the other parts of my identity.
And sort of the next question. In terms of having an injury like an ACL, I remember my dad, he ruptured his cruciate ligament like many years ago, and he didn't have the privilege of having a keyhole surgery back then. It was, they were opening up the knee and doing proper old school surgery. And he always said to me, it was always in the back of his mind that something could happen again with his knee. And there were a lot of footballers, I remember, at the time of Gaza, he did his cruciate ligament as well, and then he was never the same player. Have those things ever gone through your mind? And how do you navigate that? I mean, did you have like a lot of work with the GB coaches, not just on the physical side, but also the mental side of dealing with an injury like that as well?
I was fortunate in that when I heard the news and it was explained to me what had happened and what they would do, I had an amazing surgeon who basically said to me, the first thing he said to me was, you will be back and you will be able to reach the same level again. And so, from a mental side, I always believed that what they said from a medical perspective was true. And he also said that he was going to give me an extra ligament on the side, and he was like, you're very lucky, you're getting an extra one called a tendinosis, which means it's doubly as stable. And it might mean that you have to massage the back of your leg every week, and sit on your heels every day. And I still do that 5 minutes every day just to keep the stretch. But those small things mean that I have reached peak performance, as in, not when I say peak, I mean I am at a higher level now than I was before my injury, and I don't believe my ACL has ever held me back. And it's sort of like I feel very, very proud whenever I score diving on my knee or something, and that I actually did that the first game back for GB. I scored a diving reverse on my knee, and it was absolutely fine. And I think that kind of showed how much trust I had in it because of all of the rehab and the detail. And I think what I was taught very early on by my physios was that if you do everything by the book, there like nothing can go wrong, and even as in your control. In terms of the mental side, I did work with a psychologist because it was very hard. But in terms of, I never had any issue returning. There's one instance that I will say that my one or two of my first sessions back, I stopped very suddenly. It was just towards the end of the session. I was quite tired. I stopped very suddenly to tackle, and I jarred my knee, and I just burst into tears. And I walked off the pitch to the physio, and I had a panic attack, and I said, it's not happening again, it's not happening again, it's not happening again. And she walked me down and she was like, do you have any pain in your knee? I said, no. And she's like, okay, you've had a panic, it's okay to have a panic. And the coaches kind of realized, I think in that moment, kind of how much I had gone through mentally. But that was the last time it happened. And so I think I've been very lucky that it's not really been a mental barrier. But I get messages. I actually created an ACL support group during my during the last parts of my rehab because I struggled so much. So I created a group for women and girls and and boys, whoever, friends of friends potentially are playing hockey who have done the ACLs, and a lot of the chat we had was around firstly, how do you get your ACL back, or like the hamstring stuff, but also how do you mentally come back from it. And I couldn't really help other than to say, you just got to trust it. And I think I'm quite a trusting person, so I just trust my knee.
And what do you think you've learned overall, not just about hockey and about sport, but just life generally from going through this pretty traumatic experience?
I've learned that your life like won't end if the thing that you are craving to happen or dreaming to happen doesn't happen. I learned that hockey is not everything, and I think at age 20 when it happened, I think I probably did think that. How old was I? 21. I also, what about life? I've learned that you basically, if something bad happens to you, there's so much worse that's going on in the world. And really, your job right now is to, get better of how you can control your controllables. But, I think trauma is interesting because trauma, going through an ACL, is quite common now in terms of female footballers, but each individual's experience is still really hard. And I really didn't like when people trivialized ACLs, like, oh yeah, it's hard for 12 months. Like, no, it's actually grueling. You have to learn to walk again. You have to learn to bend your knee. The pain for about 6 months is really hard. It's extremely draining. And I think when I meet people who have done their ACLs, the first thing I say to them is, it's okay, it's shit. Like, you're allowed to say it. And whilst you have to have perspective, and it's okay to validate somebody's pain in that moment. And I often have people just cry in my arms because they're like, finally somebody understands just how hard it is. And a lot of the young girls at school, when they're 6 months into their injury, and people at school don't understand that they still can't play sport, but there's no visible injury anymore, so they find that quite hard. But I think probably the biggest thing that I learned throughout all of it was where your strength comes from and your belief. And that moment, the night before New Year's Day, when I found something buried deep within me, that sort of grit that was from the rugby pitch at age 6 or whatever, and I know I can call on it whenever I need, and that's something that I'm very grateful for. And since I have had to call on it multiple times. I am very grateful to the National Lottery, to UK Sport for funding a program like this, and it's something that the women's side has had to fight for. The men we're all funded by our Olympic medals, and that's something, the London 2012 group won their bronze medal, and so we are privileged because of that. Then we won the gold medal in 2016, and then we won the Tokyo bronze medal. And so it happens because in those key moments we've had people step up and really be stars, and the whole team become stars because of moments. I deal with it by trying to put everything that I can into hockey, take it extremely seriously, because it's an absolute privilege to be playing sport day in, day out, to have the medical treatment that we do, and it's wonderful.
Tess, you said earlier that you're very blessed, and you see it as I guess almost a bit of a joke that you're able to live this life getting paid to play hockey, something that you're really passionate about. And I always say that being able to do something and get paid for something that you really love is an absolute blessing in itself. How do you navigate with that and, like, I guess, come to appreciate the fact that this is a very short period of time in the grand scheme of things when it comes to your life? The life cycle of an elite athlete, you might have sort of 10, 12 years to sort of play with that, if that.
Yeah, I mean, it was never my plan to be a senior athlete anyway. I had no dreams of it, as I said. And then my dream came when I watched the London 2018 World Cup, watched my teammates they became my teammates 3 months later, but I watched that, and that was the moment that I knew I wanted to be a senior player. But I think I'm quite lucky in that respect, that it came through a moment of inspiration and desire to be on a stage like that and play for my country. It was not this is everything that I am. And so throughout my career, I have studied alongside. So I joined the program in my beginning of my second year at university, studying geography at Durham. And I knew I wanted to finish that, not only finish it, but I wanted to do really well. Academics has always been a really big part of my life from school, and sort of the curiosity, learning and making, what a small part of my little world better is something that's always driven me. So, I think it's amazing that I can do this and enjoy it. And I've always said I'm only going to be a hockey player as long as I enjoy it. And I continue to enjoy it. And so hopefully, there's another 4 years in me. Hopefully I'll get to LA as well. And, but then, I'm very pragmatic in the fact that I want to go and do more work in the space of inclusion, the space of women's rights, the space of building our country up to be what it's not currently now. And I think girls sometimes avoid ambition and talking about it, but I'm very happy and open to say that my hockey career is just one small part of what I hope to be a long journey in helping things improve from a equality point of view. And so I see hockey as a unbelievable opportunity for me to enjoy, but also have this sort of reach. And for some reason, people are interested when I talk. And so what am I going to do with that? They're interested because I put the ball in the goal. What am I going to do with that? And very early on, I realized that, I have a platform, and that's pretty fun, especially when it comes from doing something as trivial as putting the ball in the goal.
And you talked about, your campaign for equality and doing more for inclusion. Talk to me about the campaign for shorts.
Oh yeah, a pair of shorts. Flip me. It took me 3 years of campaigning to get a bloody pair of shorts.
Who would have thought much attention?
Yeah, it's just a pair of shorts. So in hockey, you previously could only wear skirts as women, as girls. At age 5, you get given a skirt when you go and join your local team, and the boys get given shorts. It's the same in many schools. The majority of schools still segregate based on gender. And I was fascinated as a 20-year-old starting my dissertation topics, like wondering what I wanted to do. Sort of had this moment of realization when I was like, hang on, what if I actually understand why we still wear skirts and boys wear shorts when we train in shorts every day? And this was the big thing for me. I was like, why do I train in shorts every day as a GB international player? And when I go and perform, I have to wear a tight compression skirt, a tight vest top, and I feel extremely uncomfortable. My performance is reduced. I don't feel myself. And it all started from this sort of question. And I had always been uncomfortable in a skirt. I just thought it was the thing you had to do when you play hockey. And that is the journey that I've been on, is from sort of raising my own consciousness and finding my own agency, because I wanted to wear shorts, but did I know it was going to take me 3 years, have to publish academic paper to get shorts, have to lobby the FIH, have to, all of these things. But, where it all started is that question. But I was a bit scared to do anything about it in hockey when I was 20, 21. And I was more concerned with, I'm still playing sport, so it's fine. Like, it's not affecting me. My question was, is it having an impact on girls' participation? Are they dropping out because sports get, because we always heard the stories, body image concerns, body confidence. Girls don't feel like they belong in sport. They drop out by age 14. 10% of girls are reaching health activity standards. What are the reasons? And I trawled through all of the documents, government papers. Nothing was saying anything about uniform. I scrolled through, the actual school guidelines, which said that schools can determine if girls can wear trousers or not. So this was not just a school sport issue. This was a school issue generally about segregation of gender through uniform. Why does it matter so much? Well, because I'm a geographer, I went into sort of the societal implications of this. And age 5, you dress a boy in shorts and a girl in a skirt. Okay. At age 6, you assume that all boys wear shorts and all girls wear skirts. At age 7, you equate shorts to a boy and a skirt to a girl. And so now you give the item a specific gender. But not only that, it's the legacy of what the item means. So if you take that item, that skirted item that your 7-year-old is now wearing, what she is wearing is a legacy of discrimination against women for the last 200 years, since the Victorian times. So in Victorian times, when girls were introduced into schools, into private schools at the time, because there was no free education. So when girls were introduced into schools, and they wanted to give them some activity to do, to keep fit, because they are women. We want our young girls to turn into women who are fit and healthy. But when I say fit and healthy, I mean in a specific feminine way. So how do we do that? And the teachers were quite smart. They decided that we would dress them in a specific feminine way so that they could participate in some sort of physical activity, but we would maintain their femininity, and the masculine area of sport they would not be masculinized, basically. So the skirt related to the general time of the different dress codes and the extreme societal differentiation between men and women in terms of even just what the skirt represents. I mean, one scholar thought that it because it's physically restrictive, it shows the position of women in that society. And so the legacy in sports has really kind of evolved from this corset and dress, playing tennis in the 1800s, through to a longer dress, and get rid of the corset because maybe they can't breathe, so maybe let's take that away. Then let's make a shorter skirt, and eventually you get to the pinafore, and then to where we are today with a skirt. So the skirt is the best of a bad situation, which is a legacy. So my question was, okay, fine, I understand the reasons why it's still here, but why is it still here if it's the 21st century? Why in 2020 am I wearing a skirt to play hockey when I train in shorts? And for me, it seemed pretty obvious that it was a question of, is this practical, or is this a legacy, a patriarchal legacy? So I went into the research, but I knew that this was not going to be an argument, one, based on feminism, because clearly over the last 100 years, we have seen that arguments based on feminism only get so far. So I had to look at what is the real reason that is going to get, like, what's the voice? And one of my favorite quotes from one of my heroes, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is, fight for what you are passionate about, but do so in a way that leads others to join you. So I had to understand what is going to lead people to join this movement, because if I say that you are being hypersexualized and hyperfeminized by an item that continues to be a legacy from the Victorian times, people will shut off and they'll say, no, I like wearing a skirt. Okay, well, why don't you run a marathon in a skirt? And they're like, oh, well, it's not very practical. Oh, so why aren't you wearing shorts? Oh, well, I wear a skirt because it's tradition. Why is it tradition? And then you get them interested in what the tradition is if they realize that practically they would choose something else. And it's just something we still are battling in hockey right now. The consciousness is starting to change, but you've got two things. You've got the performance, because you see the elite team train in shorts every day, and most club players train in shorts as well. And then they perform. feel like they perform their femininity on the world stage in a sport. The second thing is participation. And my research found that over 70% of women had seen girls drop out of sport because of sports kit concerns. And that really highlighted to me that all this stuff about body image, all this thing about body confidence, dropping out because they were feeling like they weren't the specific feminine ideal, actually has a root cause of the uniforms that they're wearing. And so if we increased choice, and 60% of my respondents said they wanted shorts, if we increase choice and we increase the comfort and we put the purpose of sport back, which is enabling participation and enjoyment, then if we could overhaul this sort of ideology about what women had to look like, what girls have to look like at age 5, 6, 7, maybe not only could we redefine social gender stereotypes and the gender coding that goes on schools, but maybe we would keep more girls in sport and maybe they would play at a higher level because they're more comfortable. So all of this wraps together, and I joined the Women's Sports Trust with this big dream to change hockey. I get paired with Susie Levy, this incredible woman who I call my Batman, because she is a force to be reckoned with. And she says, right, well, you got to change it from the top. You can't expect schools to change if you're not changing it from the top. And I was still a bit nervous at this time. So I wrote my dissertation and I found those findings, and I was very clear about what I wanted, but I knew I wasn't gonna be able to do anything unless it was fact. So my dissertation, I worked very hard on it and it got 94% and was encouraged to be published. Then I spent about a year, also during my ACL rehab, refining my paper so that it was ready for publishing. It had to go through peer review. And then in March, it was published, and it coincided with England hockey changing their rules, which was actually a very easy change. The hardest part was to get my teammates on board to that we wanted to wear shorts and skirts in the same team, because it was all about choice. That was the big message that we were saying. It's all about choice. So that, alongside lobbying the FIH and then getting a brand, Adidas, to give us shorts. But I mean, it's quite nice to have a success story at the end of it that we did run out in shorts and skirts, but we had the shorts DPD'd to us after being tailor-made, not by our distributor, but by our performance manager. She got tailor in, and we got them DPD'd the day before the tournament of the Euros, before it started. And so, whilst this is an amazing success story, the fine margins of it not happening is quite terrifying, and it's all for a flipping pair of shorts.
And you hit the nail on the head when you said, it's all about participation and fun, isn't it? I've got 2 young daughters, age 6 and 8, that play hockey, they do jiu-jitsu, and I never want them to feel like they aren't comfortable doing a sport because of what they are asked to wear. And I think, the other thing is that this is a question of economics as well. Like, if you get more girls into sports, more girls will be buying sports kits. And if that's shorts, then I don't think Adidas or Nike or whoever else it might be really care what they're wearing. It's like you said, it's convention that people have been reluctant to question for so many years, and we've just let it happen. And now, that stat, when I read the fact that 14-year-old, was it 10% of 14-year-old girls are physically active?
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe that.
Yeah.
So that means 90% of girls, for whatever reason, aren't taking part in sport and physical activity. And that has huge impacts, not just on their health, but also like the economics of the country, when you think about like the impact long term it has on the health service and all the rest of it as well. So everything you've said, it's absolutely right. It's just a matter of, common sense, really, isn't it? That, you get more girls playing sport and, everyone's a winner.
Yeah. For me, there hasn't been, massive backlash, which is great, because I lay out the argument for you, and ultimately I don't really care what you think on the other side, because do you believe in my right to have choice? And if you do, then it doesn't really matter what I'm wearing, because that is the ultimate agreeable point. So my teammates, one of the biggest things was somebody speaking up and saying, I personally won't wear shorts because I like the tradition of hockey wearing skirts, but I want to be in a team where my teammates can wear shorts if they want. And that was the biggest thing. I believe that there are a lot of unfounded arguments that we should keep a certain tradition in hockey. I would say that tradition is elitist, it is sexist, and it needs to change for hockey to survive. So you mentioned economics. Well, the sport comes from private schools, and hockey is a game that is dominated by private schools. I went to a private school. I have to be extremely transparent because I grew up wearing a skirt, which is why I thought it was what we had to wear. But the majority of state schools actually already offer shorts as their main option because they're a lot easier to find. Finding a bespoke skirt is actually extremely difficult. There's a handful of independent suppliers that make skirts. But in terms of Adidas or Salomon or whatever, they create shorts because that's what people run in. And if you create opportunity for people just to wear shorts in hockey, then I think you'd see a mass market change actually in hockey providers as well. The last thing I want to say on this is that related to private schools and state schools is that if we as a Great Britain women's team are wearing only skirts, then you are targeting a specific sort of demographic that go to private schools. They can see themselves. We are majority white, and when I say majority, I mean 99% white at the team, our elite teams. If you add in the fact that we are wearing private school uniforms, these things create barriers, and you can't become what you can't see. And so I think a massive part of hockey changing is the uniforms. But as we hopefully do more on our sort of grassroots diversity, we'll see more change in the makeup of our sport, and generally on other sports as well that have had this sort of private school influence, like rugby and cricket. Hopefully we will see a change, but it's slow. And if you don't believe that we should have a mix of shorts and skirts, then I think you're barking up the complete wrong tree. But the good thing is that there's been big buy-in from hockey. FIH have changed, and now French hockey have changed, and so the dominoes are starting to fall because, as you said right at the start, it's about common sense and choice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So understanding that progress isn't, just like your cruciate knee ligament injury, progress doesn't happen in a straight upward line on a graph. There's ups, there's downs, and it takes time. And sometimes it's just about how we work over time to change mindsets. And too many people are willing to play that 20-year game. Everything's about the next selection cycle. Everything's about, who's going to be on the board in the next 2 or 3 years. And we have got to think long term. The goal should be get more young people into sport, and that's it. And if we can make it easier for people to do that, then, like I said earlier, like you've been saying, everyone's a winner. And I just want to congratulate you on everything you've done with this, because it's a fantastic achievement, and you've inspired a lot more girls to go out there and try a sport, and that's fantastic. What advice would you give to not just people who are aspiring to be athletes, but young girls who feel like they've got certain societal expectations and maybe feel that it's not so cool to do sports these days? What advice would you give to young girls now? I'm talking about, especially I think the key ages are adolescent.
Yeah, you have so many pressures, and I meet a lot of girls who are embarrassed to play sport, who feel they feel a bit awkward because as your body is changing, you also feel awkward. You've got new hormones in your body, or developing. It's a hard time. I think what I'd say is sport shouldn't be institutionalized. It should just be about having fun. And if you can get a group of your friends together to do something as simple as rounders, or something as simple as even like starting a running club or something, like something that you find interesting or enjoyable, then I think that's your relationship to sport. I think everybody thinks that at school you have to be captain of the hockey team, the netball team, the cricket team. Those are your three sports. That's like, cool. What about the rest of us? And my best friend at school didn't play any, team sport, but she got really into rowing in her final couple of years because she could wear her leggings and a baggy top to go and play, or go and row. And they went down in the afternoons during sport, and they, got the rowers out, and it was a good laugh. And she got quite into it. And now she really loves the gym because she really loves Sweaty Betty. And so she wants to, look a certain way and go to the gym. And I thought that was brilliant. And then there's me being a professional athlete. And I also kind of want to look good in the gym, but I look a certain slightly different. But I just think I would say to any girl, like, your relationship to sport is yours, and it's particularly around your body. So sport, both mental and physical sides of it. The reason you do sport for your own personal good, like the relationship you develop to your body is I think it is invaluable. You sort of learn respect for your muscles, what your body can do rather than what it looks like. There's that part. But then the team aspect of sport, you forget that you're running around because you're playing with your mates. And I think I would really question as well, and this probably goes out to more the teachers who do a fantastic job, but I think too often in schools we think about representation and winning. And I really would encourage that sport at school is just for playtime, and it's just for enjoyment. And if they're messing around on a hockey pitch, I'm quite happy about that because it shows that they're enjoying it. When you're setting up a drill and somebody's not quite getting it right and you're getting really angry at them because they're not doing a V-drag in the correct manner, I'm like, well, at least they're flipping out there trying the V-drag. Like, I don't really care. So whenever I take hockey stuff, I or like master classes, they were like, oh, teach us a skill. I was like, oh, we'll teach you a skill, but I will also teach you what hockey is about, and that's sort of creating it on your own and developing your own relationship with it. That's the biggest thing that I would say. The other thing around sort of peer pressures and stuff is that ultimately you're only 14 for a year, and you're only at school for 3 years, let's say in your like teenage, and then you go to sixth form, whatever, and your friendship groups are constantly changing, and ultimately you have to have a little sort of conversation with yourself about what kind of people you want to be around. And I had this conversation with myself. I was very lucky to go to a very good school, but there were certain individuals in that school that if I hung out with, I wouldn't be where I am now. And I made a very conscious decision to spend time after school on the Astro. I was lucky to have an Astro, but or studying in the library. I made those conscious decisions because I didn't want to miss my shot. And I've just seen Hamilton, so it's about taking my shot. And I would really encourage young people to think about where they want to be, because where you are is where you'll find your people. And I found my people on the hockey pitch.
Yeah, no, definitely. And that's what sport gives you as well. So many like social groups that you can like connect with, and you've got that connection through the sport. And then I think of my own life, and so many of my good and best friends have come from the hockey pitch. And even though I don't play hockey anymore, I still keep in touch with them. And I love hanging out with them and talking about hockey politics and all the rest of it from our club and other clubs and all the rest of it. And so it does give you so much. And even now, like I've started doing jiu-jitsu and CrossFit, and now I'm developing friendship groups from that. And that's what any kind of sport will give you. And I guess my advice to young people, boys and girls, would just be, just try something, find something that you enjoy. Just get out there, go for a walk, and it can all go from there, and just keep it consistent. Whatever you do, I don't think you have to think about trying to become an elite athlete. The people who just do a little bit often are the ones that seem to be the happiest from doing any kind of physical activity, from what I've seen.
Absolutely.
Tess, how would you advise young people or anybody who's aspiring to be an athlete to deal with the pressure and expectation? And maybe that's something that you're learning to deal with yourself as well.
Definitely. I'm not the finished article. I'm only 25. I've actually just been working with a mindset coach the first time ever, because my coach is saying like, oh, you need to improve your how you handle pressure, particularly because I'm taking moments like strokes. And so I found we kind of found each other, this mindset coach, and we've been working on who I am. And you think, well, how is that going to help you in pressured moments? Our whole first conversation was about what matters to me and who I want to be in the future, and kind of my values. And she kind of has really helped me a little bit re-engage with what Sarah Kelleher taught me at age 17, which was my character is enough. And so my big message to people aspiring to be an athlete, dealing with pressure, dealing with setbacks, is kind of, you have already a makeup of characteristics that make you unique. Some of them will help you become the best athlete that you will be if you dial them up, and some of those characteristics will hinder you, and so you need to learn to dial them down. And so I have an eclectic mix of characteristics. My biggest characteristic is probably passion and bravery. I'm not afraid to say what I think, and I dream extremely big. And some people would say that is naive, blind optimism. Some people think it's manifestation. I truly don't know what it is, but it means it's both a strength and a weakness. I can, say everything's going to be fine, take the risk, pass, and it won't come off. But I could also say everything's fine, take the risk, pass, it does come off. Take the shot, it does come off. And so I've been learning to dial up and dial down that blind optimism and sort of can-do attitude to different areas of my life. As a new business owner, I have to really dial up the realism rather than the optimism. But on the hockey pitch, for any young or any young athlete, figure out what your characteristics are, what makes you you, and then when you're in your sweet spot, what does it enable you to do? And then when it's too less or too much, what does that happen? How does that happen? I think the one thing that, so that's the first thing. The second thing would be, there are no shortcuts, and I have probably one of the best backhands in the women's game because I spent 7 years working on it, and I'm still working on it. I still go out and do extra reps because I want to have the best backhand. And that doesn't come because I'm naturally talented. I'm sure there's an element of natural talent, but if you look back, nature versus nurture, I truly believe that you drilling your skills and kind of having a real core base, whatever your sport is, if you have those key aspects through hard work, it will shine in the moments that count. So those are the two things: your character and your no shortcuts.
Drills give you the skills, man.
Exactly.
Jiu-jitsu mats, drills give you the skills. You've talked about a lot of people who've had an influence over you. Are there any particular mentors that you'd want to mention, and maybe a life lesson or any kind of lesson that you've had a resounding effect on you?
My grandma, Pom, she chose to show me what true friendship is, and that's pure loyalty. And I like to, what loyalty is a big part of who I am, and looking after your teammates. If my grandma, I can call my grandma a teammate, but I think in terms of becoming an elite athlete, you are in pressured environments, but you have to have each other's backs. And I've seen too often people having their own back before others. And so I would put loyalty up there. Secondly, my mum, who has taught me the relentless optimism. And she, has a very stressful job trying to save planet Earth in a way. She works in conservation, and I've seen her day in, day out fight for a cause. And that's optimism linked with just relentless going for something. She was part of creating the deep sea mining moratorium, which is going to save a lot of sea life and minerals. And she was relentless. I saw every day what she was doing, and that's something that sticks in me, that drive. Thirdly, I've got to put Sarah Keller in there, because she taught me that character was really important for hockey, and to believe in myself. To be a champion is not something about winning, but about your character and where you hold yourself. And I think my final one has to be Susie Levy, because she is just unbelievable in the way that she looks at me and she tells me, what do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And she says, we're going to go and do it. What do you want to change? Let's go and do it. And that doesn't come from blind optimism anymore. That comes from logical steps to achieving something. And when I talk about achieving, like, unfortunately, I've had to take on a lot of press and media attention and put myself out there for this cause. This is not the only cause that I care about, but for some reason, people are listening to me at this very point in time about this. And she sat me down very early on and was like, you're probably going to have to face a lot of, pushback from various people. Are you ready for it? So I don't even know. Like, I can handle when a coach tells me that I should have done a pass better. And, even sometimes that makes me feel a bit upset. Am I ready for it? And she said, well, you only know until you know. And I am thrilled that she is alongside me, because she is keeping me, with my head firmly on my shoulders, looking towards the real issues. And, if I'm being perfectly honest, what this is all about, choice, is actually really about women's right to choose in every aspect. And I am terrified in what populism is doing to our country. I'm terrified as to what the right-wing party and government, how extreme they are going. And so this is actually an extremely liberal left-wing thing. Shock horror, let's ask if we could wear shorts and skirts. Like, could you politicize it? Of course you can. Is it about participation, performance? Ultimately, yes. But we're building something here which is around choice and inclusion, and that matters more to me than somebody calling me out on LinkedIn. So thank you to Susie for that.
Brilliant. No, I love it. We've got a couple of minutes left, so I just wanted to wrap up by asking, have you got any sort of routines or hacks that you might want to share with people, like your daily routine or anything that you've found interesting?
Yes. It's called the minimum dose.
Yeah.
Basically, because you have a whole bunch of things on your plate, if you can do every day the minimum of it, then you'll find yourself doing more than that minimum. So my example would be, if you're at school and you have a big essay due in a week's time, but you've also got hockey training that evening, you don't only do hockey training. You plan the intro and the first paragraph. You just plan in bullet points. That's the minimum dose that you've decided. That means that when you come back to it, you've already got a head start to it, and you come back and you've got a bit of momentum. It's the same with rehab exercises. You start, the minimum dose I could do, but actually once I've got going, I enjoy it. And that's something that I use sort of every day, especially, starting a business. There's so much you can do, but it might be a really busy day of rehab, but you have, or hockey training or something, but you have an hour. What are you going to do with that? The minimum I could do in an hour is this, and that's going to help me. The second thing that I really love to do is watch comedy. And that's, I would really encourage people, like, whatever makes you laugh. Like, I actually normally start my day with, drinking my turmeric shot and watching a bit of I like Instagram Reels comedy because it just really lightens up my day.
And finally, any message for the world? Anything that you want to say to everybody?
Yeah, make sure you vote for the right team. I wouldn't. Well, in all seriousness, yeah, of course, vote. But the big message I normally give kids at schools is that they have a voice. Why do we listen to some people and not others? Because they have a platform. And some people we should listen to, and some people we should try and drown out. And I think about what your voice is, and can you influence just a couple of people. And in this sort of, I like to call it my feminist consciousness movement of shorts, can you talk to your teachers and ask if you can get shorts? Can you talk to your mates and see like what actually does what makes you feel comfortable when you play sport? And do you know we could actually do something about it? And then the last thing I would say is go to inclusivesportswear.com, because all of the help that you want, it's basically your big sister, your big brother to help you get what you need, launching in October. But it's going to be, your big sibling helping you get the change that you want.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Well, Tess, thank you so much for today. Really enjoyed chatting to you. A few technical glitches, but I'm sure the final edited version will be extremely polished. Congratulations on everything you've done. You know, you've got a huge future ahead of you, both on and off the field, and I'm looking forward to you smashing it this year in Paris. So thank you.
Thanks, Gurmej. Appreciate it.
All right, that'll do.
I've got to head to my rehab now, so
you haven't had the chat about
that's chill. I'm seeing my advisors on Sunday, so I'll get back to you.
All right, let's do that and have a proper chat about it. But thank you so much.
No, my pleasure.
Really enjoyed that, to be fair. Like really,
me too. Me too.
Thank you. Brilliant. And send that link over from that Riverside.
Yeah, I will do.
All right, cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you for listening to Life Mastery. To hear more about our podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is my name, Gurmej Singh Pawar, Miji Media, or follow my Instagram page, which is events_Gurmej. And we also have a website, which is www.mijimedia.com. And all other ways to follow us will be available in the show notes, including TikTok, X, LinkedIn, and all the rest of it. Thanks again for listening, and speak to you soon.